happy to introduce today our July webinar speaker, Dr. Barbara Bucklin. She's currently the Director of Instructional Design and oversees Ardent Learning staff of instructional designers, writers, and developers. Today, she'll be talking to us about using OBM to sustain behavior change in automotive training. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Bucklin.
Thank you, Kyle. So as Kyle said, I'm going to be talking today about using OBM to sustain behavior change in automotive training. The company that I work for, Ardent Learning, mostly works with automotive clients. About 70 to 80% of our work is with automotive clients, although we do work with other industries. I'm going to use some examples today from the automotive industry and the automotive world to talk about how we use OBM to sustain the training. And as you know, if you're an OBM person, you know that training alone usually does not sustain behavior. So we need to include other types of interventions and solutions in order to sustain behavior change long term. So Kyle, I don't know if you've turned it over to my PowerPoint deck yet. You can go ahead and do that. Okay. So today what I'm going to talk about is why evaluation is important. So in order to know if behavior change is sustaining, we need to evaluate to identify, what's happening to behavior after the training has been implemented. I'm also going to talk about the training evaluation overview, talking about Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. If you're familiar with the training industry, if you do instructional design or you work with training clients, you know Kirkpatrick's 4 levels. It's a model to really measure different types of evaluation. So I'm going to go through that a little bit with you to give you a description of what that means and what each level, how each level is defined. And then I'm also going to talk about 3 different case studies with 3 different automotive clients that I've worked with to evaluate training and sustain behavior using OBM type interventions. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer. There is a chat window, so please provide your questions as we go throughout this webinar, and Kyle will address those questions and let me know what people are asking. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and first start off with a little video. And this really illustrates, it's really funny, and this is one of my favorite videos, and it illustrates why evaluation is important. It shows a client-vendor relationship in the real world, and it identifies if our clients don't see the value in what we're doing, what can happen. So let me go ahead and play that. I'm going to go out of the PowerPoint for a second, and Kyle, let me know if for some reason, oops, we've got it right here. If for some reason we can't see it.
Hi. Is there a problem, sir? Yes. A question about the final toll. Yes. You see, we didn't budget for this. Excuse me? This was marked 1999. Yeah. Well, I've only got $7 set aside for this. So what are we going to do today?
Well, I'd like the highlights, but for now I can only pay for a trim.
Okay, so today we're only going to do the trim?
No, the highlights, but I can only pay for the trim.
I mean, how much of the taco stand was one of the...
About $12.
Yeah, right. About $12. Sir, well, we're not the taco stand. No, it was either beef, the same thing as I had here. You had the filet. Yeah. Cow. Okay, let me make a phone call, see what I can do. Maybe I can get you $8.50. Can you do $8.50?
I'll pay for the highlights next time, but for now, I need you to just go ahead and fill them in.
So basically, you want me to work for free?
No, I don't want you to work for free. It's just a test. That way I can see if my husband likes it, and then you can roll the cost over until the next time I need color if he likes it.
I went through in line items some of the stuff that we would just remove. I'm not making any money on this either. You got to help me out. We got a discount bin. I know. I've checked the discount bin, but I want this one. We can do this. This is not a challenge. This is an opportunity. We tried with 3 entrees. Oh, yes. You ordered 3 entrees. Well, we ordered, but it's order. Yeah, we want. What's your name? Todd. You got to work with me. That one's $19.99. Mike, come on. Let's do this.
Well, I can cover your hard costs, but that's really as far as I'm willing to go.
I'll give you $8.50 today. I'll come back next Tuesday. We're going to make it up on the next one. Excellent. Well, go ahead. I won't pay this time, but what we're going to need you to do is show us how you made it so we can do it on our own in-house from now on. You did. It's great dinner.
Okay, so you can see why if you don't show results through evaluation, sometimes our clients don't really see the value of what we're providing. So that was just kind of a funny, oh, and it looks like it's trying to start over again. Hold on.
So we're going to change the billboards a few times.
Little glitch. All right, so let's move on to talk about the different levels of evaluation that I mentioned. So like I said, in the training industry, there are the standard 4 levels of evaluation that Kirkpatrick made famous a long time ago. And even though these are maybe a little bit outside of what we talk about in the OBM realm, this is what our clients talk about when we work with training organizations and training clients. So level 1 is typically what participants think about the program, its reactions and satisfaction to the program. They're often referred to as smile sheets. So if you work in the training industry or you've delivered workshops, you've probably done something like this type of survey to find out if your participants really liked the training, if they found it interesting, entertaining, engaging, if the room was comfortable, if the food was good, that kind of thing. And 92%, according to ASTD, which is now called ATD, they changed their name a couple years ago. It's the Association for Talent Development. According to their data, 92% of organizations report that they measure at level 1. They do this type of evaluation. And then level 2 is the extent to which knowledge and skills presented in training have been learned. This is typically measured through a pre and post test. Some organizations only measure it through a post test to determine if the training that was presented, if the learning objectives were actually learned. And 32%, according to the same data, measure level 2 evaluation. And then level 3 gets into behavioral change. This is really as organizational behavior management practitioners what we're interested in. Did behavior change on the job? This is typically measured ideally through observations. Sometimes it's measured through interviews or survey instruments because it is very difficult, as we know, to measure behavior change. It's very time consuming, and we really have to be observing our participants to see if their behavior really did change on the job. And according to ASTD, ATD, 11% measure level 3. So as you can see, the percent of organizations who measure at each of these levels decreases as the evaluation gets more difficult and more time consuming. And then the last level is level 4. This is referred to as results or business results that are meaningful and important to the organization. So these are those kinds of accomplishments such as results on a customer satisfaction survey, sales, profitability, customer retention, things like that. And some people in the learning world and the training world also talk about a level 5, which is return on investment. I include that within level 4 because, as you can see, so few people really measure at this level. There's no real need to separate those 2 levels. So only 2% are measuring at level 4. And why do you think that is? So I'm going to pose some questions about each of the levels, and please write your answers and your thoughts into the chat. And then Kyle's going to let me know what they are. And then I'll supplement that with some of my own experiences about why companies fail to measure beyond level 1. So how about level 2? I'm going to give you about maybe 30 seconds to think about that and write your answers into the chat window. So I'm going to be silent for a couple of seconds to let you think about it. Why do you think companies fail to measure learning? Why do only 34% of organizations even do some sort of a pre and post test? What do you think? So Kyle, do we have any questions or thoughts in the chat window?
So, nothing yet except from me. My personal thought is that it's a lot more difficult for companies to measure learning. It's a simple, satisfaction survey won't suffice to measure anything beyond level 2, and a lot of companies don't think that it's worth their time or money to do that extra investigation.
Correct. That's what we've found as well. So great comment, Kyle. We've also had clients who are concerned that a pretest might turn off the learner. They may be less satisfied with a workshop or with some sort of online learning if we test them at the beginning or even at the end. They may think that they often say that they think that the training will end on a bad note, a sour note, if they're asked to take a post-test. Oftentimes, too, organizations have no requirements related to effectiveness of the learning, which may seem surprising to a lot of us, but there may be no certification requirements. They may just want to check the box that they've delivered the learning. People who are not familiar with learning, instructional design, OBM, may think that, if you train somebody, of course they're going to learn it. We put the training out there. Why would we need to measure it? And also, too, some organizations are not that sophisticated in terms of their learning management systems. So they may not have a system in place to administer tests. And it can cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to manually input that kind of data in a system. So how about level 3, behavior? And as I mentioned before, this is what we're most interested in as OBMers. Why do you think companies fail to measure whether there's been a behavior change after a training intervention? I'll give you another couple of seconds, and if anyone on the line on the webinar wants to think about this and put their thoughts in the chat, and Kyle, you can think about it as well. Give you a couple more seconds for that. Any ideas in the chat, Kyle? Or any ideas you have?
Yeah, so for behavior, it seems to me that in a lot of organizations, behavior is seen as an expense to get the results the companies are looking for. So why measure the behavior when they're only interested in the change in their bottom line, if there is one? And so that's why a lot of companies, I think, only measure those final results.
That's very possible. Yes, I agree with that. They are really only concerned with changing the bottom line, although not very many organizations measure that either, unfortunately. But as I said, I kind of gave you a hint at the beginning. It's very time consuming, and we know this as behavior analysts. We measure behavior often. That's really a lot of what we do. It can take a lot of time. It can take a lot of people to go out through organizations. A lot of these big companies have tens or hundreds of thousands of employees that they're training. So to really observe and measure their behavior is kind of prohibitive. I have some suggestions later on that I'll share for how we've done that and gotten around the time constraint by using managers of people directly and using certain tools, electronic tools, to measure behavior and to report that behavior. Sometimes organizations are concerned about sharing data with corporate. For example, they're afraid that the data will be misused and sales consultants or their managers or whoever the participants are who are being trained may be punished or worse if it shows that their behavior is not changing. So they may be afraid to measure at this level. Some clients don't understand evaluation, like we talked about with level 2, or they may not really see the benefit in it. They may believe that if they train people, their behavior will automatically change. So why spend the time and money and effort to show that? And also, sometimes unsuccessful results will reflect poorly on the client, not just the performer or their manager. Sometimes a training department is afraid to measure behavior or even results when we get to level 4 because maybe they're afraid that if they don't show a change, that they'll have their budgets reduced or taken away from them. So there's some fear there. And then also sometimes time and money run out. Evaluation may be an afterthought, and the organization has used all their budget on developing the training, so they don't have that time or money or want to put the effort into measurement. So last one, results. And as Kyle said, this is probably the most important to most organizations. What is the bottom line? Did they get a return on investment for their training dollars spent? Did they improve sales? Did they improve customer satisfaction or customer retention or profits? Why aren't they measuring this if it's seemingly the most important thing to them? So I'll give you another couple seconds. Okay, any thoughts in the chat, Kyle, or any thoughts from you?
So with respect to results, I'm mostly talking or thinking of ROI here, since a lot of companies, they're measuring their end line things, profitability, that kind of stuff. But getting an ROI is really, really difficult, especially with something like training. And if the companies are not willing to put forth the expense to get measures further up the ladder, then they're going to lack the data needed to get a really solid, measure of the ROI. And it's going to be an expensive measure to get, just like any, some of the other ones might be, like measuring behavior.
Correct. That is very true. Without having those other metrics, they really have no way of even correlating training results with those data that they might be looking at. So that is very, very difficult. And as we know, there are a lot of things that impact and influence performance, including processes, marketing, advertising, incentives, management practice, all those things. So it's really difficult if you're not doing things scientifically, or if you're not collecting other data to know if training really did impact business results. It's also another one that's very difficult and time consuming to collect. And in my experience, I found that it takes a lot of time and IT expertise to get systems, complicated systems, to talk to one another. For example, if an organization has a learning management system where they track training completion and training certification, that system will most likely need to somehow talk to or interact with their customer satisfaction data collection system, their sales data collection system, and other systems. And perhaps all of those systems would need to talk to one another. So I'm going to talk about the first case study in just a couple of minutes. And that was one of our initial huge challenges in terms of collecting level 4 data. And that was a long time ago too. That was back in about 2006 or 2007. And so the systems were even more difficult in terms of working together. There was no such thing back then as big data. And some of the same reasons that we talked about before for not collecting level 4 business results data are that the client may not understand evaluation. Unsuccessful results in this case may reflect even more poorly on the client or the performers or their managers. And again, sometimes the time and money runs out. Evaluation is an afterthought. They think, wow, wouldn't it be nice to show that we had some sort of an impact or business result, but we've spent all of our money on creating this training, so we can't do that. So those are some reasons for why companies fail to measure. And you saw the data. Not very many companies even do measure beyond level 1. Did they like the training? But when an organization fails to measure the impact of its training on behavior and results, we know that there's no way to tell if the training actually made a difference. Are training participants doing anything different? Were there any meaningful improvements? Was there a return on investment? Organizations spend billions of dollars annually across, even just in the US alone, on training. And if there's no proof that it's made any difference, where is that money going and why spend that money? So at Ardent Learning, we've done things a little bit differently. We work really closely with our clients and the client organizations to measure all 4 levels of evaluation. So the first case study that I'm going to talk about is an automotive client. And as I mentioned earlier, all three of these case studies were done with automotive clients, and they were all very similar audiences. So this first one was a multi-year project for dealership parts and service personnel. So a little background on who these people were. They're the people who work in car dealerships when you perhaps buy your vehicle at the dealership and then you bring it back for repair, for routine maintenance, for any sort of need that your vehicle has after you've purchased it. So these are the people who would write up your service need, when the people that you interact with and ask questions with, and they walk around your car and take notes. And then it's also the people who maybe supply the parts. They work in the dealership to make sure that the correct parts are available to put on your car. There were 11 different job roles within the parts and service organization within this manufacturer. So we partnered with the manufacturer, and then the training was delivered to the people who work in dealerships. So what we did was we started with a detailed training needs analysis, and this one was kind of an interesting situation. They had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of courses for these 11 job roles that had been around for a very long time. In fact, some of them had been around for 15 or more years at that time. And there was really no strategy or strategic plan in place for what training was available. And there was no set curriculum path either. And there was no, a new person coming on the job didn't necessarily know what training course to take first or second or what order. Managers had a hard time identifying what training their employees needed. So we had a lot to work with to begin with. And we found out what the needs were. We looked at the main, what they call in the automotive industry, key performance indicators. So the main metrics that the organization wanted to impact and influence. And those were things like customer satisfaction with their service experience at the dealership, increased sales, increased profitability, and customer retention, keeping customers coming back to their dealership when their vehicle needed service. And so what we did was we looked at all of the existing training, and we identified what they could keep, what they might want to refresh and update and change a little bit, but some of it could still be kept, what needed to be discarded altogether, and where there were gaps, where there was no training at all available for needs that we identified. So we built a curriculum and training recommendations that we shared with the clients. We worked in partnership with them. They approved it. And then we went on to design and develop a training curriculum and courses for all 11 of these non-technical service job roles. And that ended up being 60 courses in a good blend of web-based webinars and workshops, depending on the topic and the need and whether we were trying to train more a knowledge or a skill. And then we built in a training evaluation plan. So we did that right away, and so that they would be aware of and budget for what it would take to evaluate the training across all 4 levels. So that's our project overview. So now I'm going to talk about the evaluation results. So for each course within the curriculum, we asked the level 1 questions related to knowledge and skill acquisition. So we try to dig a little bit deeper when we do a level 1 evaluation beyond just, did you like it? Was the food good? Was the room comfortable? So we ask them, and this is just self-report, but we do ask them about their own knowledge and skill acquisition. Were there clear expectations set within the training? Were the course materials of value to them? Were they engaged in the training? Was the navigation easy if it was an online course? Did they like the facilitator? Was the facilitator knowledgeable and engaging if it was an instructor-led course? And we asked them about their overall satisfaction. So for this particular client in this project, we had scores of 3.5 and above on a 4-point scale consistently across the entire curriculum over time. Level 2, so we measured pre and post tests with this particular client. We did multiple choice scenario-based questions, and we did equivalent pre-tests and post-tests. So we had a pool of questions for each learning objective that were randomly selected. Equivalent questions were randomly selected for each time a participant took the test. And we found an average of a 30% knowledge gain across the curriculum from pre-test to post-test. And then we also measured level 3 behavior. This we did a little bit almost backwards, you might say. We measured level 4 first, which I'll get to in a moment, to identify business results and impact on business results. And then what we did was we took the top improvers and the bottom improvers, meaning those who improved the most. So we didn't just look at the people who were doing the best and the worst after training. We looked at baseline to post-training and looked at the people who improved the most, or who maybe didn't improve at all, or improved a little bit, or in some cases maybe even had worse performance after the training. And we did in-depth interview with those people and their managers to talk about their on-the-job behavior change, and particularly what factors led to successful or unsuccessful implementation. Was management supportive of the new behaviors on the job? Did they have the right tools, processes, and resources to support that on-the-job behavior change? What other things led to successful or unsuccessful implementation, depending on which audience we were talking to? So we did that across all of the 11 job roles, across all of the curriculums. And so then moving on to level 4 for business results, these were the things that we used to identify those top and bottom improvers and to identify if there was a significant change in performance from before to after training. So if you're not in the automotive world, some of these metrics probably don't make a lot of sense to you, and that's okay. These are just an example of the different kinds of things that we measured for each job role. And I mentioned we had 11. This is just a sampling of some of those job roles. So we had anywhere from 2 to maybe 5 or 6 per job role that we looked at. And these were those metrics for each of the job roles that would roll up into those overall key performance indicators that I mentioned. So one of the types of analysis that we did was, and this is for the service manager metrics that I just showed you, we did a between group analysis between certified service managers and those who had not taken training. So for each of those metrics, we averaged them over time and did a between group analysis. And we found that these differences were statistically significant. And we found similar results across all of the different job roles. And then perhaps even more interesting is our within group and within participant analysis. So for each of those job roles, for each participant, we had graphs that looked much like this. Very, very similar patterns, which were not very surprising to us, but were quite surprising to the client. And this one may look a little bit backwards to you, but I'll explain it. So this was one that we had for warranty administrators. And what we were looking at here was percent of return claims. So a warranty administrator is the person who submits a warranty claim if the customer brings their car in for warranty repair work. So it's covered by the manufacturer. The customer doesn't have to pay for it. The warranty administrator at the dealership submits that claim. And sometimes if they make a mistake, or when they make a mistake, they get it returned back to them by the manufacturer and they have to fix the mistake. So this costs the dealership money, and it really costs the manufacturer money too, because there's more time spent in fixing these errors. So they were trying to decrease these errors. And what you can see here is we took baseline data, we looked at data for a year prior to the training implementation, and then we continued measuring during training. So I mentioned that there were a lot of courses, a full curriculum for each job role. So we continued measuring. It took most participants about 6 months to finish their training, and then they were certified. And I should mention too that historically with this client, once a person was certified in their curriculum, they were done. So during our needs analysis, we found out that some people had been certified 10, 15 years prior, and they were still certified even though they had not taken a training course in all of that time. So what we found was pretty quickly after training certification and after training was completed, behavior began returning back to baseline levels, which again wasn't surprising to us, but it was quite surprising to our clients. So what we did at that time, or here this kind of summarizes what I just said, this research shows that behavior reverted back to the previous state, in other words, baseline, within 3 to 6 months when OBM sustainment efforts were not in place. So we made some suggestions for sustainment and for keeping that behavior at the levels that they were looking for, or maybe even improving it beyond that. So the first recommendation was feedback and management support. We know, this is not a surprise to us as OBMers, we know that without accountability for behavior change and without environmental changes and consequences, typically in organizations in the form of some sort of feedback, management support, coaching, those kinds of things, training participants will rarely implement the new skills or continue implementing those new skills on the job. We also took a look at the training methods used. Although we had a pretty robust curriculum, we found ways that it could be improved. So we incorporated even more scenario-based learning to incorporate right in the training the types of skills and natural consequences that would follow those new behaviors. So we incorporated very scenario-based, realistic training methods using realistic consequences that they would receive on the job. And then we also incorporated refresher training. So some data show that short courses or information, if it's changed up, so this is still antecedent interventions, but if we incorporate short courses or information at intervals following the initial training, this has been shown to keep those skills at or close to post-training levels. So we recommended that type of continuous learning in addition to the other suggestions for sustainment. So that ends case study 1. Now I'm going to move on to case study 2. So this second client, again, another automotive client, they were lucky enough to work with us just a couple years after that first case study. Actually, the first case study was still in progress. They were still an active client. We started working with another automotive manufacturer to work with their after sales or parts and service part of their dealership organization. So for this particular project, and again, like I mentioned, it had similar elements. We did a needs assessment to identify what the gaps were and what the needs were. We also developed a process and curriculum development. In this case, though, this one is a little bit interesting in that it was very different from the first case study. This was a newer manufacturer to the United States, and they really had no training in place. Whereas the other one had, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of courses that we had to dig through. With this particular organization, we essentially started with a blank slate. They had 2 courses that were adapted from their parent company overseas that they were using in the United States. But besides that, they really had nothing. So we built a full curriculum, and that's why we also built a process for them. And so this just illustrates the curriculum that we ended up building and developing. We had 4 levels of certification for this particular client, all the way from bronze to platinum, both web-based training and instructor-led training. So that may be hard to read over the webinar, but what's on there isn't that critical. It just shows you that it was, a pretty robust curriculum with lots of courses for each of the 2 job roles. And I should mention, in this case, we were only looking at service managers and service consultants versus the other case study where we looked at 11 different job roles. For this particular company, I'll go a little bit more quickly through the first part of our evaluation. We measured level 1, as most people do, and we found a 4.98 average on a 5-point scale, where 5 is strongly agree, across all of the courses in the curriculum. This particular client, I should mention too, did not have a very robust learning management system. So we weren't able to deliver both pre and post tests. We tried very, very often to do that, but it just didn't work out. So we were only able to measure post tests to measure learning. And then for level 3, we did some surveys. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do interviews or very robust observations ourselves, but we did some interviews, and we found that over 95% of participants stated that they do apply the knowledge and skills learned in training on the job. And we also then developed some observation checklists. So this was a tool that we developed for sustainment. We built sustainment right into the curriculum because of what we had found in that first case study with that other company. We built a plan all along for sustainment. And one of those pieces was an observation checklist for managers to use with their employees. And the nice thing was that it was able to capture data and in terms of behavior change on the job and report those data back to the learning management system. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment after I share with you what the level 4 data looked like. So for each job role, we measured customer satisfaction. So this is a customer satisfaction index that this particular company had. So we measured pre-certification. We also had metrics like this for service managers, which really mirrored what this looks like. So I won't show you both. Pre-certification, and we also measured at each level of certification. We found a statistically significant improvement from pre-certification to both bronze and silver. And for whatever reason, there was no difference between bronze and silver, but then another statistically significant improvement between silver and gold. And then the image on the right just shows you a consolidated view of the post-certification scores. We also looked at and found identical results, really, looking at level 4 evaluation with service consultants using multi-point inspections. So there's a picture of what a multi-point inspection looks like on the right. This is something that the automotive manufacturers want each and every service consultant to do every time a customer comes in to the dealership. This is really a selling tool for them. They have data that show that with multi-point inspection usage, there's more, they have more sales, because this is what the service consultant and the technician working on the car look at and use to identify if there's an additional problem that needs to be fixed with the car. So again, the data look almost identical. There was a statistically significant improvement from pre-certification to bronze and silver, no real difference there. And then another statistically significant difference between silver and gold. And overall, statistically significant difference from pre-certification to post. And with this particular client, we did not find that decline and that return to baseline that we did with the first case study, because, as I said, we built in elements into the curriculum to sustain behavior on the job. So one of those, like I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, was an online or mobile coaching guide. So this was a responsive design. It's a coaching guide that they can use, managers can use with their employees, either on their smartphone, on a tablet, or on a laptop, or any type of computer, both iOS and Android. And for each high-level learning objective in the curriculum, the service managers were required on a monthly basis to measure and use this coaching guide to work with each of their employees. We had activities like role plays, discussions, and observations. Most of them were observations on the job with a customer. This particular one that you see on the screen was responding to customer objections. And so the manager would fill this out, this coaching guide, this checklist, and then it would generate a result, and then they would submit the rating, and it would go both to the manager's learning management system as well as the employees, so that we could keep track of behavior change and keep track of whether or not managers were actually doing this with their employees. So it created accountability for the managers, and there was a consequence or a contingency in place for them to actually do this sort of thing. And this type of coaching guide has been around for a long time, but generally in the past it has been done on paper, and there's no way to put any sort of contingency or consequence in place to ensure that managers are doing it. So this is really nice. We also incorporated scenario-based learning throughout the curriculum. This particular image that you see here is a platinum level course for service managers. It was one that we did at the end of their curriculum. It included, it was done in an instructor-led training format. It included video, complex decision-making, and problem-solving. They worked in 3 groups of 3. We kept the class sizes small. It had a leaderboard so they could compete against one another. It had branching simulations. Each case study took anywhere from an hour to a couple of hours to complete. It kept track of points and time. And at the end of each section of the case study, the participants would get back together with the facilitator and talk about the decisions they made and why they made them. And we tried to incorporate those realistic, real-world consequences on the job into this simulated scenario-based learning environment. And then this just shows an example of something that they might respond to and hit submit and get points for. We also incorporated fluency-based learning elements. We know through lots and lots of research over the last 40 or more years that if you include both time and accuracy elements in learning, that you're going to, that training is going to result in better retention and application to the job. So for each course in the curriculum, we also included Fluency, and this was also available either through a tablet, a phone, or computer. And also short refresher training. So in order to maintain certification, we required quarterly learning on relevant topics related to the curriculum and the learning objectives that we were training. So what we found with this particular client is, with sustainment in place from program inception, behavior did not revert back to the previous state. Okay, so case study 3. We started working with another automotive client in around 2007, very similar type of work. Again, it was for dealership service personnel. We started with a needs assessment. For this particular client, we also built a process for them, or worked on a process for them. And we also developed a curriculum based on the identified needs and gaps in the needs assessment. One of the things that we've done differently with this client is to deliver in dealership training, which is ongoing. Every 3 or 4 months, a training facilitator from Ardent Learning goes into the dealership and works one-on-one or one-on, small groups of service personnel right at the dealership, using the context of their own job environment, their own forms, their own tools, their own processes, which we have found to be very, very effective. It's a little bit more expensive, so not all organizations can or would be willing to do this. We also deliver workshops, webinars, e-learning, mobile learning across the entire organization to all service personnel. And we built sustainment and evaluation into this program as well. So I'm going to quickly go through these results. They're pretty similar to the ones you saw for the other clients in terms of level 1 satisfaction. We got really good overall results for satisfaction, and we have been. This is still an ongoing client that we're working with. Most of the satisfaction data are 98, 99% and above. And we did, like I said, with some of the other clients, we also try to incorporate questions like the ones you see on the result on the right, about how they expect the results and the behavior changes to impact and improve their job performance. With learning, we are fortunately, with this client, are able to measure pre and post tests. So for each learning deliverable, we administer a pre-test and a post-test. These are also equivalent tests to measure knowledge gain, and we found an average gain of 23% from pre to post-test across this curriculum. And then we also measure behavior and sustainment too. So for this particular client, much like what you saw with the previous case study, we have electronic observation checklists for managers to use to evaluate performance. So this is just another example of something like the one that you saw for the previous client that captures data and illustrates whether or not behavior changes. So this is nice. It really combines our level 3 analysis with a tool for managers to use to help sustain behavior on the job. Level 4 results. This is an ongoing effort, but what we found so far, before and after training certification on average, is an increase of about 5.2 points in customer satisfaction as measured on their customer satisfaction index, about a 15-point increase in multi-point inspection use. That's what MPI stands for, multi-point inspection, like that inspection checklist I showed you with the previous case study. And then 278 more retained customers. So this is a big one. This is what all the automotive manufacturers want. They want their customers to continue coming back to them for their service and maintenance needs. They don't want them to go to another dealership within the same brand, or even worse, to go to what they refer to as an aftermarket or independent service provider like a Jiffy Lube or a Pep Boys. They want to keep them in the brand. And trends show that improvement grows as training participation continues. At this point, we've been delivering this curriculum for quite a few years, and we've continued to have training facilitators and consultants in dealership to continue working with those individuals. And we're on about, I think we're on the 19th session for this particular client. And the nice thing too is our facilitators deliver the training on tablets So if they have a new group, the automotive industry does have quite a bit of turnover. So if there's a new group, they can go back to the first basic course, or if they have a more advanced group, they can just open up that session on the iPad and deliver training on an advanced topic. So it's a really nice curriculum that we have in place for that client. We've included a lot of the same sustainment elements that we talked about with the other case study too. This is one that's a video that we include, an example of a video that we include between each training session. We push out these types of videos between sessions and require our participants to review them. We use a little bit of humor that will hopefully help make the change stick. I'm going to show you this one example.
You know, I'm not sure who designed these repair orders. Not a very user-friendly document. But one of your responsibilities as an advisor is to clear things up for your customers. The key area is parts abbreviation. For example, in this repair order, I've got a description that says filter assy air. My guess is your customer has no idea what that means. Your job is to spell it out, make it clear for your customer. Give those things a try. Until next time, we'll see you on the drive.
So some of the other elements that we do for sustainment are, like I mentioned, feedback and management support through those observation checklists electronically. We also incorporate training methods that we know work, such as fluency training. You can see the little image of the pop quiz. That's a fluency training activity that we also deploy between sessions, and also refreshers. So we incorporated a lot of different sustainment activities to keep the behavior at post-training levels and to prevent the dip back to baseline after the training sessions. So to summarize, this program has been an ongoing effort built on the premise that there needs to be continuous learning, performance, and OBM interventions and refreshers in order to truly impact behavior. So that's all I have for you today. We have time. I saved about 10 minutes at the end specifically for questions if there are any. Kyle, have you gathered any questions as I've been speaking?
Sorry, I've been dealing with some technical issues on our end, so I haven't been able to listen as much as I would have liked to. I did see some of the results that you had there with the improvements and actually being able to sustain them, and there were some really great, great results there. If anyone else has any questions, I see we have at least one or two more people in here. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions from anyone that's here. Any closing notes?
Nothing for me. Thank you, everybody who participated. I was joking with Kyle at the beginning that it's such a nice summer day. I really appreciate everybody who came in from the pool or the beach or whatever they might have been doing to participate in this webinar. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of the OBM network, I want to say thanks a lot for coming and presenting to us today. And for everyone else that is watching or going to watch eventually, this will be up on YouTube sometime soon once we get a couple of edits in. So again, thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.